Well, good afternoon to you. 3:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up today, Ryan Girdusky is with us this hour from the 1776 Project. We'll talk to him about that election in Argentina, capturing the world's attention. We'll get more details on the wild man, Milei, who is promising to destroy the left. A lot happening there. Julio Rosas is with us at 4:30 today. We'll talk to him about all of these anti-Israel protests, including some that he's been in attendance at. Julio always has some of that frontline knowledge for us. And David Strom is here at 5:30 from Hot Air. It's Joe Biden's 81st birthday today. David's going to help us celebrate. And you'll talk to us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Yes, Joe Biden turning 81 today. And I'll tell you what, it's the one topic the White House does not want to talk about. Actually, there's a lot of topics they don't want to talk about. I started with a lie. They try to avoid a whole bunch of things, and among them is Joe Biden's octogenarian status. They do not want to talk about him being 81 years old. In fact, they didn't want to talk about him being 80 years old last year. You know, they scheduled a wedding at the White House to try and distract the press from Biden turning 80 last year. Yeah, that really happened. That was Naomi Biden's wedding last year that they scheduled in order to keep the press from talking about Biden turning 80. Can you imagine? Like a little girl, you know, your whole life, you dream about your wedding day. You're going to make it special. It's going to all be lined up. You're going to pick the perfect date with the perfect man. It's going to be a perfect event and a perfect dress and you're going to remember everything. You'll have the photographer, the videographer, everything will be perfectly arranged. The flowers. No, you're going to get married on this day so that we can avoid talking about Grandpa's birthday. Isn't that amazing? In fact, the Wall Street Journal reminds us of this weekend. The editorial board talking about Joe Biden. They say Joe Biden turns 81 years old. If President Biden's birthday Monday is anything like his last one, he'll eat a cake quietly with family and hope nobody else notices. When he turned the big 80 last fall, the White House arranged a marriage as a distraction for the press. Mr. Biden's granddaughter was wed on the South Lawn. The timing, quote, was not a coincidence, two sources told CNN. Not a coincidence. They just used his granddaughter in order to distract everyone. Regardless, voters have managed to notice. How'd that happen? That Mr. Biden is showing his years. 77% of Americans say he's too old for another term, according to an August AP poll, including 69% of Democrats, 74% of independents, and 89% of Republicans. So everybody, an overwhelming majority of everybody, thinks the man is too old. Now, here's the trick to this data. The too old claim is imprecise. He's too senile. That's what they really mean. That's what the voters are reacting to. And don't allow them to play the too old game because they're going to use it to say, oh, well, if Biden is too old, then Donald Trump in his late 70s is, therefore, also too old in the eyes of the voters. And actually, when voters are polled on that question, a minority of voters think that Donald Trump is too old for the presidency. He's near Biden's age. He's in his late 70s. Biden's in his early 80s. And so I've seen some press outlets pointing out, should Donald Trump be reelected next year, by the end of his term, he will have become the oldest president we've ever had. That's true if Donald Trump is reelected next year. That's an interesting data point. But the funny thing is the press is using this. They're using Biden's senility as a cudgel against Trump's candidacy. How did that happen? I thought we were just going to judge Biden here. No. The Republicans going to have to take the brunt of this one. So that's the plan. So anytime you see that, whoa, they're judging him as too old. No, they're judging him as too senile, even if the question is phrased as too old. Because you can see it. It's visible, right? Who says Mr. Biden hasn't united the country, the Wall Street Journal asks. During the 2020 election, concerns about his age were muttered sotto voce. But now they're front and center in his reelection bid. Next year, Mr. Biden will be 81. Next week, Mr. Biden will be 81. This was written a couple days ago. Already, he is struggling on camera and limiting his public schedule. His aides fear he might trip again. on television. Quote, Biden will not be able to govern and campaign in the manner of previous incumbents, Politico reported this week. Quote, he simply does not have the capacity to do it, and his staff doesn't trust him to even try. So the Journal asks what should be an obvious question here. Why is he asking the public to keep him in the Oval Office until 2029 when he would be 86 years old? 86 years old? If he can't take the rigors of a presidential campaign, why would voters think he can handle 4 more years of a grueling job, which might include being shaken awake in the wee hours to respond to a Chinese invasion of Taiwan? Yeah, imagine that picture, right? Somebody's got to wake Joe Biden up. Mr. President, takes a couple shakes. Is he okay? And you finally get him out of his sleep, and he's still got the CPAP mask on. They have to rip that thing off of his face so he can get up and respond to the Chinese invasion of Taiwan. Is this what any of us really want? No. I spoke to a business owner. I won't be more specific than that today. But I spoke to a business owner earlier who told me that she's very conservative, loves Trump, hates Biden. And she said she deals with clients on a daily basis, as many business owners do. And she says she talks to her clients about politics. And she says, do you think Biden should be reelected? And these are Democrats that she's speaking to. And they'll say things like, well, not really. I'm a little concerned, but, I'm going to vote for him. She'll say, well, you don't have to vote for him. You could write in your family members. She'll recommend to them that they, she's not going so far as telling them to vote for Trump. She just says, write in somebody else, write in your uncle. Like, you don't have to vote for Biden. And it's true, you don't. In fact, don't go at all. If you're feeling uncomfortable, just stay home. That'll make it easy for you. Let somebody else decide here. You don't even get involved. If your plans were to vote for Joe Biden, but you're a little uncomfortable about that given his advanced age and senility, just don't go to the polls. You can skip it. It's okay. I thought that was brilliant. It's a good idea. So this is what the Journal concludes about Joe Biden's age and what they say is his obvious decline. Running for re-election is an act of profound selfishness, they say. He has wanted the big desk since at least 1987 when he first ran. Aging people, even if they're not surrounded by yes men, can be the last to notice time's toll, as many can attest after trying to take away dad's car keys. Right? Are they pointing out something interesting here? This is an obvious point. The older people get and the more they begin to lose it, we refer to that as senility, the more they are not only in an advanced age, but their mind is going. That just happens to people. My suspicion is it's going to happen to me if I'm blessed with old age. That the people around you need to help get control of your life. If they love you, they would. It's an expression of love to help care for the elderly. In fact, throughout history, great societies were measured by their treatment of their elderly. That's, of course, the way things should happen. So as you lose the capacity to do things and sort through things and organize things, then the young people in your life should step up. Or your spouse should step up if she has the capacity. Jill Biden she's not even a PhD. What is she, an education doctorate? Dr. Jill Biden, Ed D, should be stepping up right now and saying, Joe, it's time to stop. For you, it's time to stop. This is a big task. A younger person should do this. Someone who's more with it should do it. You should step aside. And she's not doing that. Because as the Wall Street Journal says, this is profound selfishness on the part of the Biden family. Which is par for the course, we should point out, for the Biden family. It's always been this way. Joe Biden has always relished his power. The people around Joe Biden, his family, have always relished their access to power. The family has made it a business to cash in on that power. And in fact, they may have any number of unresolved business arrangements or criminal prosecutions that they would like to navigate through, and they need Joe Biden to stay in place. So whether it's Joe Biden's own profound selfishness or the people around him who are using him, this is not in any way a good arrangement. It's not serving the United States well at all. Have you checked your paycheck lately? Have you checked your expenses lately? Have you checked your communities lately? We are living in one of the most demented possible times, and unfortunately, it's because we're being overseen by a demented president. That's just true. I'm just saying that. I'm not saying that to mock him in any way. I'm just assessing the disappointment of this era. And everybody feels it, right? Everybody feels. I just read those numbers. 70-something% of the public. It's like crazy. Nobody agrees. You can't get anybody to agree at these rates. 69% of Democrats, 74% of independents, 89% of Republicans are all saying, too much, too weak, too awful. Let's not do this anymore. And yet, we're still wondering whether or not Joe Biden will prevail by virtue of the left's capture of so many of our institutions. That people are going to be browbeaten into submission to go and pull the lever for Joe Biden next year. That they're convinced that Donald Trump is an existential threat to the country. That somehow Trump would be worse, although we have an objective measure. If you would allow yourself to free your mind for just a moment from all of that, I'm talking to the lefties here, you would recognize that your life was so much better under Trump than it is under Biden. And that is not an accident. Those two things are very much connected. There's often this dance in politics where negative things occur, like the economy going down. The Obama people specialized in this. Crappy economic reports were never their fault. And the Biden people are doing the same. In fact, they're not even saying that the crappy economic reports are not their fault. They're saying the economy's great right now. But still, everyone always distances themselves from negative things. Like when bad things happen, oh, it's not my fault. And it's a mixed bag. That's true. Sometimes there's, the president can't control everything, obviously. In fact, we live in an environment where the president's not supposed to control everything. That's what a totalitarian government does. But the left's stranglehold on power is immense. And the extent to which they can actually make your life meaningfully worse is unfortunately pretty big. And we've seen it play out, haven't we? And so Biden, there's a lot of, it's like kind of a weird parlor game being played right now by the media. The media keeps emphasizing that, oh, look at this. He's a little old. The White House doesn't want to talk about it. And then the White House is like, wow, he's so sharp and amazing. They say that Biden is like the greatest athlete ever. They get straight on, they become like straight Kim Jong-un on this issue. That Joe Biden is the most adept, capable, thoughtful, incisive guy that any of us ever met. He works harder than all of us at the White House. It's like, oh, will you please? Will you stop with this? And so we're in the midst of this very weird game. Now, what does the left want? The left wants a more competent hitman. They want somebody who can run, who's more cunning, who's less obvious, who doesn't give away the game so easily, who can spin things successfully, who can convince the public to take this pill that is not medicine, I assure you. That's what the left wants. They say Biden is just too incompetent here. The left doesn't, he's putting their power at risk. So that's why David Axelrod from Obama World wants to see Biden ejected right now. In fact, the White House was asked about this today. What's Biden's response to David Axelrod saying he's too old?
You mentioned the president's excited to be celebrating his birthday, but I'm curious, David Axelrod told the New York Times, quote, Biden thinks he can cheat nature here and it's really risky. A, what's the president's response to David Axelrod? Does he respect his opinion? Does he think he's right? But also, is there a real alarm happening behind the scenes that the president is simply too old to stake around for another 4 years?
No, there's no alarm happening behind the scenes. I can only speak behind the scenes here. There's no alarm happening behind the scenes, and I'm certainly not going to comment on everybody who has something to say.
There's no alarm. Well, Jamal Bowman hasn't pulled it yet. That's all.
David Axelrod
I didn't say that. Nowhere in my response to you that I said that. I said I'm just not going to comment on everyone that has a comment to say. They're going to speak for themselves. I'm going to speak for the president, and here what I'll say is, look. And also, it's just not my job. It's not my job to think through or to
it's not our
tell
job to
people
think.
what to think, right? Whether it's the American.
It's not my job to tell people what to think, she said. Now, let me just make an obvious point. Yes, it is. It is your job to tell people literally, you're a White House press secretary. Your job is to tell people that they should think that Biden is doing a good job. You should tell people that. Now, will they believe you? Well, quite obviously not. They don't believe you. But the job of the press secretary is to tell people to think about things differently than perhaps the detractors of the White House would want you to think, right? Isn't that the point? Why even have a press secretary if not to convince people to rearrange their thinking towards the benefit of the White House, or more importantly, in the United States, to convince people that you're actually doing a good job for them, because you are. That's in a perfect world, that's what you would do. But of course, every White House press secretary spins everything. They try, you spin it a little bit. You're like, we're working hard. That's right, right? It's not my job to tell people what the thing. She has no idea what the job is.
American people out there, or a political analyst, or as your question is about David Axelrod. It's just not my place to speak to that.
It's not my place to speak. Okay, all right. She also thinks that she can't change anybody's minds. She says that. In just a moment, I'll play that audio for you. It's unbelievable. 3:23 now. There's just so much to get to. Here's Coringe today.
The polls that show that the electorate at large,
James Rosen, of course, first,
and also significant majorities within the Democratic Party believe that the president is too old. The polls that show the American people and also significant majorities within the Democratic Party don't want him to run again. And the polls that show his handling of the economy, foreign policy, all of these dismal polls, his job approval ratings, does the White House have any basis to challenge the accuracy of that polling?
I'm not challenging the accuracy here. That's not what I'm doing. What I'm saying to you is that, we're not going to change the minds of Americans. I get that. Americans are going to feel how they feel, and we're going to respect that. And I've said that
You're not going to change their minds.
Many times. I said that moments ago. What I can tell you is what our perspective is. What I can tell you is how we see things.
Some rare honesty from Coringe as she admits that she's incapable of changing people's minds. Not in my skill set, says Corinne Jean-Pierre. All right, coming up, we're going to be joined by Ryan Girdusky from the 1776 Project. And we're going to fly down to South America, take a closer look at a big election that has the globalist community absolutely freaking out. The American left really ticked off. And the guy who just won seems pretty amazing to me, actually. We're going to talk to Ryan Girdusky about that in just a moment. Hey, good afternoon to you. 3:36 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up today, Julio Rosas will join us. Some updates on some anti-Israel protests going on here in the United States of America. The left really, really exposing itself. And then David Strom will be with us at 5:30 from Hot Air. We'll celebrate Joe Biden's 81st birthday together. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Voters in Argentina have had enough of the status quo. They've had enough of leftist control over decades, which has driven them into obscene hyperinflation, perilous national debt, unaffordable food, immense poverty. And now, of course, they're looking for a way out. And that resulted in the victory this week of a libertarian candidate by the name of Javier Milei, who is not shy at all about his criticisms of the left, at all. For more on this topic and the relevance it might have here in the United States, I want to bring in Ryan Girdusky. He's the founder of the 1776 Project Political Action Committee and the co-author of the book, They're Not Listening, How the Elites Created the Nationalist Populist Revolution. Ryan, good to have you back with us, sir. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
This guy Milei is a wild man. I've seen all these videos of him holding a chainsaw in the air as a symbol of what he wants to do to the government. You got one video where he's taking each department and ripping it off the wall. He plans on getting rid of them over and over. And I have to say, it's very satisfying to watch and to see his rise. Am I right to be encouraged by him?
I mean, so yes, but it is very difficult for a lot of things that he wants to do. My worry is, like Trump, he doesn't have much political experience, though the Constitution in Argentina is much different than ours, and there's the limitations over leaders are much different than ours. But he doesn't have the Congress at all. The Congress is still controlled by Peronists, who are center-left. So with that, with the Congress not being, in his grasp and in his control and his party's control, that does mean he's going to have to use a lot of executive power to do some of the things that he wants to do. Also, by the fact that he wants to switch the currency to being backed by the dollar, though the country doesn't hold any dollars in its reserves. That's a little difficult, but that doesn't mean it's impossible to do what he wants to do. Look, Argentina is a disaster. It is an economic disaster. People think of all of South America as being fairly poor, except Venezuela before the communists took over. But Argentina, before the Peronists took over, was one of the wealthiest countries in the world. It was certainly wealthier than most parts of the United States, than the entire United States, and wealthier than most parts of Europe, all the way into like the 1930s and 1940s when the Peronists really started taking over and seizing control. So they have had a immense decline. In 2020, I want to put in perspective for your listeners. In 2020, $1 was worth about 80 Argentinian pesos. In 2023, just 3 years later, $1 was worth about 1,000 Argentinian pesos. So you're talking about hyperinflation to a level that most American audiences would never possibly understand. People on a fixed income, people with, holding reserves in Argentinian pesos, middle class Argentinians were absolutely decimated in the last 3 years, and that's why he won a 12-point victory. It's an absolute political mandate. It's one of the largest in recent Argentinian history. So he has a lot of availability to do what he wants to do.
Yes.
And he do all of it? We will wait and see.
So it's interesting. What was kind of bizarre, I guess, but not that surprising, is although he wants to officially move the country to the dollar, unofficially, much of the country's business is already done in the dollar, isn't it?
Yeah, but the central bank is much different than people's businesses. And the central bank, he wants to abolish the entire central bank.
Yes.
So, let's see if he could sit there and do it. He wants to abolish most federal departments in the entire government. So we'll see how much he can possibly do that. He's going to probably move the Argentinian embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem in a very quick succession that he has probably unilateral power on without Congress.
Yes.
He's extremely pro-Israel. He's extremely pro-America. He says the only allies Argentina has are those willing to fight socialism, which he says are America and Israel. I hope he doesn't watch any of our news stations like MSNBC.
I know.
He'll be extremely disappointed.
Yeah, for sure. So I didn't see any headlines on this, Ryan, but did Joe Biden call him and congratulate him and say, I'm looking forward to an excellent, productive relationship?
The Secretary of State put out a tweet. That's all I saw, was the Secretary of State putting out a tweet saying, congratulations, we can't wait to work with you, which is very standard practice for every international leader to sit there and say. Ultimately, it's not in our interest. He's definitely not anti-American. He's super pro-American, although probably not super Joe Biden, but he is super pro-American. And let me tell you, Italian leaders, when we show up, they show up fiery. So Italian leaders from all around the world.
Well, I'll tell you, it's one of the rare countries that wants to join the dollar. Like everyone else seems to be leaving and going for other currencies. And so Joe Biden should welcome this with open arms, but I don't think he is. I don't think he's ready to say a single thing.
I think the most important thing that people forget is that most countries in South America have been moving closer and closer to China in rapid succession. China has been investing in a lot of countries. Brazil is very close to China. Even under Bolsonaro, Brazil was moving closer to China. If Argentina moves, and Colombia has a left-wing government that's become closer to China, if Argentina bucks the trend and moves closer to America, it could be the very beginning of it will take a very long time, but a slow process of bringing both continents really under the American sphere of influence and away from China and pushing them closer to the American sphere of influence, because we have been losing our grip in Latin America over the course of the last 30 years. And even right-wing leaders across all of Latin America have moved closer to China, looking for money for investment, looking money for that. So if he bucks the trend and he sits there and moves away from China, and I think Argentina was, I might be wrong on this, but I believe they were on the precipice of joining the BRICS. So if he moves away from that as well, looking for an alternative Chinese-backed currency. That's a big win.
It's interesting to me that the left so reflexively hates this guy here in the United States of America because, if you actually spend any time looking a little bit deeper into his bio, he's not like straight. You couldn't identify him immediately by a political party here in the United States. And this is typical of a lot of candidates from other countries because they have different politics than ours. But certainly his personal life is far more libertine than you might expect from a conventional politician here in the United States. He's got kind of bizarre sexual lifestyle. He's, into multiple partners, and he kind of brags about it. But simultaneously, he is aggressively pro-life. He absolutely measures humanity from the moment of conception and says that all life should be protected. And he's not a totalitarian for sure. He wants to make the government a lot smaller and empower the people a lot more. And boy, the left really hates him here in the United States. Why is that, Ryan?
Yeah, he said when they asked about same-sex marriage, he said, "I don't even care if you sleep with an elephant." So he has a way about him, but he is aggressively pro-life. I just think that he is deemed listen. The left in this country, as you've seen over their celebration of Hamas murdering 1,000 plus Israeli civilians and causing sweeping terrorism, the far left in this country especially, they hate civilization. They hate Western civilization. Anyone who celebrates Western civilization, they hate any roots of Western civilization. They hate classical architecture. They hate They hate classics in the classroom. They are absolutely prone to the decimation of Western civilization. It's just what they are, and they do believe they could use government control to bring about some harmonious humanity. And the entire anti-colonial rhetoric, the entire anti-Israel rhetoric is rooted in anti-whiteness and anti-Westernism and anti-capitalism. Right. That is the entire basis of what they believe.
And the other piece is that an election of a guy like Milei is an indictment of their failed experiment.
They've had a unanimous control of a wealthy country for half a century, and it's steeped in poverty. By the way, a country with very high IQs measured internationally, a lot of agricultural ability, a lot of wealth, institutional wealth dating back decades, a lot of ability. They had a lot of ability to manufacture, to create, exports, good weather. Every social condition you would want for prosperity exists in Argentina, as it does in very few parts of the world. And even there, they could not make it work in any real way.
Yeah, I'm looking at any number of actualities from on the ground, why people were tempted to vote for, and it eventually did for Milei. There's a butcher here quoted by Reuters this past month, September actually. He's 53 years old, named Marcelo Capobianco. He says he fears having to close his business. He's considering emigrating overseas. He displays his meat prices in dollars, the currency that many use as a refuge for the constant devaluation of the peso. He says, quote, "It's dramatic. We don't know how we're going to pay the rent this month, how we're going to pay the electricity. People are angry, have every right to be, because they can't afford to buy a kilo of meat." He said, "We're already thinking about what we are going to do, because in reality, if this continues, I think we're going to have to shut up shop." I can read you like a 52-year-old locksmith who says it's time to close that central bank. He agrees that we need to dollarize because the politicians wouldn't be able to print more money and then misspend it. This is, the guy who comes on before us, our friend Dan Bongino, he often measures things in the sense, things aren't bad enough yet. In Argentina, apparently we found the breaking point. Your currency has to be utterly worthless for people to break away from all of this.
Yeah, and you remember, Argentina is a country that at one point seized people's private wealth in their banks because the country was bankrupt. They were going to individuals' bank accounts and taking money. I mean, they sustained a lot of pain for a very long period of time, and it wasn't enough to make them switch governments. And maybe it also it's tempted by a sensationalist figure like Milei, who, he's eccentric, he's out of the box, he's a meme. But it matters. I mean, all those conditions matter for people to run to a certain type of politician. And I really wish Argentina the best. He has a lot. But the good thing is, when you're a politician, you're starting out so far behind, even like a Joe Biden. Joe Biden took over in the midst of the recession. Things were still closed. He constantly brags all the jobs he created. Well, when everything's closed and you just reopen it and millions of people start going back to work, you can sit there and claim credit. If he can just get inflation down to 40%, he can sit there and say, look at the rounding success I had, and hopefully change the Congress there. Who knows? But the good thing is when you're at the bottom, there's really only one way to go. And for Milei and for Argentina, they're very close to the bottom.
Absolutely. Well, he's a fascinating figure, and if you want to amuse yourself this week, just go and watch some of these videos. Not just amuse yourself, you get totally thrilled, quite honestly, watching all of this because you're really hopeful that a positive future could be ahead.
It was like Chris Matthews watching Obama back in the day.
I know. I had to thrill up my leg. I'll admit it. For Milei. Not for Obama, but for Milei. Hey, thank you so much. Ryan Girdusky, I really appreciate your time today, as always.
Thank you.
Bye. Ryan Girdusky. It's amazing. And you see these videos of him last night upon the news of his victory. And Argentina, as crappy as the system is there, they're capable of counting their vote really quickly. They were actually able to get the results in pretty fast. Just imagine if, places like Pennsylvania could actually do that. Pennsylvania is behind Argentina in terms of election infrastructure, but they got their vote in. And there he is holding a chainsaw in the air to celebrate. And the people are going wild for this. And he's got a lot to do. He's got a lot of work ahead of him, and a recalcitrant government among the problems. But God willing, he's able to make some progress. And again, it's the value of all of this for us as Americans is, first of all, Ryan laid it out, the dollarization part, maybe a better relationship in South America. That's all well and good. But ultimately, what I'm looking at, and what I think a lot of us are looking at, is, can it be done? Can you turn the ship around? Can you watch another country as an example that better days are ahead? And that's encouraging. I love stories of optimism, one where personal liberty is restored, where the value of the person is restored, where the government gets back in its damn place. That's a great thing. And so wishing that guy all the success in the world. I hope it works. 3:50 now. All right, let me see how this translates on radio. And by translates, I mean literally it's in Spanish. But if you can hear the tone of this guy, this is Javier Milei, the newly elected president of Argentina. And here he is in the video, what I'm about to share with you, the audio here. He's got a whiteboard with a bunch of magnets on the board, and each magnet lists a different ministry for the government, like our various agencies here, the Department of Education, et cetera. But in Argentina, it's the Ministry of Sports and Tourism, the Ministry of Culture, the Ministry of the Environment and Sustainable Development. Oh, you know how awful these places are. You can tell already. The Ministry of Women, Genders, and Diversity. They have a Ministry of Women, Genders, and Diversity. What? The Ministry of Public Works as well. So listen as he takes each of these off the board and says, out, out, out. He'll rip each one down and throw it on the ground. Here we go.
Turismo y Deporte, afuera. Ministerio de Cultura, afuera. Ministerio de Ambiente y Desarrollo Sostenible, afuera. Ministerio de las Mujeres y Género y Diversidad, afuera. Ministerio de Obras Públicas, afuera.
Afuera. There's a great moment in the video where he goes, the Ministry of Education, and he looks right at the camera and he goes, indoctrination. Afuera. And he throws it down on the ground. And now you understand? Do you understand this? He also did a fantastic interview with Tucker Carlson, who traveled, it was months ago now. And I guess Tucker called this one correctly, or at least identified this one. And so you learn a lot about the guy. And as I mentioned, he's very pro-life, which is cool. And he makes the libertarian case for being pro-life, which unfortunately, in the United States, people associate libertarianism with cowardice on that particular question. Oh, no, it's about a woman and her own body. Well, no, there's a separate life here involved, And he admits that. He said, yeah, it's a life. So as a libertarian, I believe in protecting it, do no harm. We'd like to protect that life. That makes the most sense, actually. He's not ashamed at all. It's super compelling. I would go out of my way to watch it if I were you. Coming up, we're going to be joined by Julio Rosas. He's keeping track of the left's craziness right here in the United States. Out in the streets yesterday in West Palm Beach, right? And where he sees these insane leftists just going bananas about how much they hate Israel. Why are they doing that? He'll explain.